The dream of meaning in a broken machine. There is a current beneath Candide, submerged. Mythic river that carries the bones of ancient symbols, twisted into new shapes by the pressure of satire and the heat of Voltaire's intellect. If we read the book only as a surface voyage from castle to battlefield, from dungeon to utopia, we miss the subterranean resonance, the pulse of allegory, the heartbeat of something older than philosophy and sharper than mere parody. For in this tale, symbols rise and fall like constellations glimpsed from the deck of a storm-tossed ship, fragmented, shifting, and still somehow guiding. First among these is the figure of Candide himself, not merely a man, but an embodiment. He is not born so much as unveiled, naive, and naked to the world. His name means pure, unblemished, sincere, and he carries this name like a flame into a darkened world that delights in snuffing it out. He is everyman, but not the hardened, cynical everyman of modern fiction. He is the prototype that Adam expelled not for sin, but for kissing with too much innocence. His banishment from the Baron's estate echoes Eden, not because it is a fall from grace, but because it is the first blow from the hand of reality. The world beyond is no paradise lost, but a chaos never ordered. And then there is Pangloss, the voice of reason hollowed into farce, a walking parody of philosophical rigidity. He is not just a character, but a spectral idea, a man possessed by an abstraction that has devoured his ability to feel. Like a medieval alchemist repeating incantations over lead that never becomes gold, Pangloss chants his optimism over bleeding corpses and stillborn revolutions. He is symbolic of the human tendency to cling to systems long after they've ceased to make sense, the way a moth clings to a flame even as its wings crisp to ash. He becomes a cautionary tale, not against hope itself, but against unbending ideology, the kind that cannot adjust its gaze even when the world turns upside down, the earthquake that destroys. Lisbon early in the tale is more than a disaster. It is a mythic rupture, a crack in the philosophical sky. This was, in Voltaire's time, a real event, one that shook Europe's intellectual foundations. Thousands died, churches crumbled, and the faithful were left asking how such divine violence could be reconciled with a benevolent creator. Voltaire threads this catastrophe through his tale, not merely as a setting, but as a symbolic explosion. It is the divine no, the cosmos, answering Pangloss's optimism with tectonic finality. The earth splits, and with it, so does the illusion of harmony. It is as if the world itself is protesting the lie that all is well. El Dorado, by contrast, is the glowing mirage of philosophical perfection, a paradise hidden in the folds of the world, unreachable except through absurd chance. Candide stumbles into it like a fever dream, where gold is worthless, kindness is ubiquitous, and reason governs all. Yet even in this utopia, there is an emptiness. Candide cannot remain. He is drawn out again by the gravitational pull of his fantasy, Cunegonde, the living symbol of desire deferred, love idealized. El Dorado is not salvation. It is the impossible ideal that mocks us by existing just long enough to prove we don't belong there. It suggests that even the perfect world cannot satisfy if it exists apart from longing, from striving, from the ache of the real. And Cunegonde herself, she is not a woman, not truly. She is a cipher, a metaphor, a dream of love stretched so thin it becomes translucent. Candide chases her as one chases youth, or happiness, or salvation. She is the embodiment of what we believe will redeem us, if only we could possess it again. But, like all illusions, the closer we draw to her, the more she distorts. When Candide finally finds her, she is changed, and so is he. The fantasy curdles into obligation. The ideal becomes a weight. In this, Voltaire offers a symbolic truth as bitter as it is universal. Sometimes what saves us in imagination enslaves us in reality. The garden, at the novel's conclusion, is the most enigmatic symbol of all. It stands like a punctuation mark. At the end of chaos, a symbol that resists interpretation precisely because it feels so grounded. It is not Eden regained, nor is it the glittering ideal of El Dorado. It is simple, earthy. It is a return not to purity, but to presence. To cultivate the garden is to live without system, without grand meaning. It is not resignation, but reclamation. In a world where all larger meanings have been dissected or destroyed, the garden is the one act of construction that remains. It is a symbol of labor, of attention, of choosing to root oneself in the particular, rather than being seduced by the universal dot in Candide. Even travel becomes a metaphor for the philosophical journey. Each voyage across oceans, over mountains, into cities and jungles is less about distance and more about layers peeled away. With each step, Candide loses a piece of his former certainty. The world is not a book to be read, but a battlefield to be survived, and each location he visits functions like a stanza in a poem about the futility of prediction. Nothing stays as it seems. No map can account for chaos. Voltaire's symbolic. Geography insists that movement does not equate to progress. One may circumnavigate the globe and still return home broken, wiser, and unsure if wisdom was worth the cost. Voltaire's satirical lens also casts a symbolic glare on power, on how those who wield it clothe themselves in justice, only to unleash cruelty. Monarchs, clergy, scholars all appear in distorted forms, grotesques meant to expose rather than instruct. Through these portrayals, Voltaire constructs a kind of symbolic anatomy of human society, a body infected with arrogance, puffed up with certitude, and bleeding from self-inflicted wounds. These are not merely characters, but caricatures of institutions, and in their deformity, we glimpse the uncanny truth that the world is not evil because of malevolence alone, but because of indifference, bureaucracy, and the mechanization of cruelty beneath noble words. Even laughter itself becomes symbolic in Candide. It is the tool Voltaire uses to bridge terror and clarity. The absurdities are often hilarious, but their roots are not. We laugh, and in laughing, we realize how close we stand to the abyss. Humor here is not comfort, it is revelation. It is the grin of the skull beneath the skin of civilization. Every time we chuckle at Pangloss's blind devotion, or at Candide's naive exclamations, or at the grotesque misfortunes strung together like carnival beads, we participate in the central symbolic act of the novel, the acknowledgement that the world is broken, and yet here we are still breathing, still thinking, still laughing. Thus, the symbolic structure of Candide is a shattered stained glass window, once meant to tell a singular story of divine order. Now fractured, its pieces reassembled into a new pattern, one that refracts doubt, invites skepticism, and lets in the unpredictable light of human experience. Voltaire does not offer us a final image to worship, but a shifting collage that demands our attention and interpretation. It is this symbolic ambiguity that gives the novel its lasting power. It does not tell us what to think, but teaches us how to look. The alchemy of suffering and revelation. To read Candide is to watch Voltaire perform a kind of literary alchemy, where the base metals of human suffering are transmuted into the gold of revelation. beneath the surface of its picaresque adventures, lies a web of symbols so potent that they seem to hum with hidden meaning. Each episode, each character, each seemingly absurd twist of fate is a cipher waiting to be decoded, not to provide answers, but to deepen the questions. The Castle of Thunder Tentronk, Paradise as Prison. The story begins in an Edenic microcosm, the German Castle of Thunder-10-Tronckh, where young Candide is indoctrinated into Pangloss's philosophy of unassailable optimism. The castle, with its manicured gardens and self-satisfied aristocracy, is a parody of the biblical Garden of Eden, a place where ignorance is mistaken for bliss. But unlike Eden, which is lost through disobedience, Thunder Tentronck is destroyed not by sin but by the absurd brutality of war. Voltaire's message is clear. Innocence is not a virtue but a vulnerability, and the world does not punish transgression, it indiscriminately devours the naive. The castle's ridiculous name, a jab at Germanic nobility, underscores its fragility. It is not a real fortress, but a stage set, a flimsy illusion of order that collapses at the first touch of reality. Candide's expulsion from this false paradise is not a fall from grace, but an awakening, one that sets him on a path where every lesson is written in scars. Eldorado, the utopia that cannot be kept when Candide and his valet Cacambo stumble upon Eldorado, the fabled city of gold. They find a society so advanced and harmonious that it seems to mock the pettiness of Europe. The streets are paved with precious stones, the children play with gold as if it were pebbles, and the inhabitants laugh at the idea of organized religion or courts of law. Here, Voltaire unveils his vision of an enlightened society, one where reason, not greed or dogma, governs human affairs. But Candide cannot stay. His restless heart yearns for Cunegonde, and so he departs, laden with riches that will bring him nothing but trouble. Eldorado is the one place where Pangloss's optimism might actually hold water, and yet it is unreachable, not because of geography, but because of human nature. We are, Voltaire suggests, incapable of sustaining paradise. Our desires, our attachments, our very flaws pull us back into the fray. Eldorado is less a place than a mirage, a taunting reminder of what we cannot have. The garden, a pact with the finite, the novel's closing image, the small garden, Candide and his companions tend in turkeys, its most enduring symbol. Unlike the sprawling, illusory paradise of Thunder Tentronck or the unattainable perfection of Eldorado, this garden is modest, earthy, and demanding. It requires labor, patience, and a willingness to get one's hands dirty. In this, Voltaire plants his flag. The garden is not a retreat from the world, but a deliberate engagement with it on human terms. It rejects both Pangloss's grand abstractions and Martin's corrosive nihilism in favor of something simpler, but more profound, the dignity of small, meaningful acts. The garden does not promise salvation or universal truth, it only offers the chance to kneel in the soil and create something that was not there before. The shipwrecks, battles, and disasters, the universe's indifferent gaze throughout Candide's journey. The world delivers one catastrophe after another with the regularity of tides. Earthquakes, wars, betrayals, they are not punishments, not tests, not part of some grand design. They simply are. Voltaire strips suffering of its romanticism, presenting it as random, senseless, and often absurd. The famous Lisbon earthquake sequence, which directly critiques Leibnizian optimism, is not just a historical reference but a metaphysical statement. The universe does not care about human philosophies, and yet Amid the chaos, Voltaire allows for moments of connection, even beauty. Candide's reunion with Cunigond, now aged and bitter, is not the triumphant romance of fairy tales, but something more fragile and real. Their love, like the garden, is imperfect, but it is theirs.